Welcome back to another Take the Lead podcast. I am your host, TeraChantelle. We have such a lovely guest, Anwar. You are phenomenal. Everything that you are doing, please introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be on this podcast. I know we're going to be spilling major tea together, so I'm so excited about that. My name is Anwar White, and I am the CEO and founder of the Get Your Guy coaching program. And so I really help smart and successful women heal their hearts, date effectively, and ultimately get their guy. I mean, that's the name of the company. Hello. But there's a lot of work that has to be done to get there, right? And so that's what I do with my clients. And so, I have been doing this for a very long time, even like going back to elementary school and helping the boys talk to the girls and the girls talk to the boys. So I think it's just something that I was meant to do. And I've been doing it ever since, very successfully, might I add.
Wow. So, how did you know this was meant for you?
I have always been someone who has observed and someone that has always had a variety of different perspectives, both the masculine and the feminine. And so it's really, I felt very much like I was saying before, a conduit and someone who can really translate the different, language and actions that are associated with both genders. And so I think that's just really helped me in this work, but just in life in general, right?
Mhm.
Navigating a variety of different relationships, not just romantic.
I have noticed that it is such a blur area between men and women. The communication is not there. Men don't know what women want, and women don't know what men want. What have you observed between those two miscommunications?
It's interesting. So I work mostly with women. So I'll speak to that perspective. One thing that I've noticed in doing this work for around a decade or so is that women actually are not as clear as they think about their wants and their needs. And part of it is I think that women have been socialized really to not be asked and not know what they want, to kind of go with the flow, right? To like let someone else lead. But I want us to be thinking about relationships in a kind of a whole new way, right? Where women are actually leading the relationship based on what they want, based on what they need. Like I always tell my clients, it's important for them to be very clear about what they want and what they need so that they can communicate it to the men that they're dating, right? So the men can show up for them, solve the problems as it relates to what they need. And that's how relationships kind of give and take, right? If and this happens a lot of the times, we're letting these men kind of do whatever they want and us kind of go with the flow and be that cool chick and like down chick or whatever, that you lose your voice. And when you lose your voice, you lose your power in a relationship. And that's when things can get dangerous or toxic. So I never want women to be in that sort of situation, right? So on the flip side, guys are, historically not good at communicating. Unfortunately, it's a huge generalization, but it's a generalization that I have found to be true, that they are not very open with their like very deep down feelings. And it takes a different level of trust to get there. So especially in the early phases of dating, a lot of women are really wanting to understand how they're feeling and what they need. And a lot of men are not there yet. They don't even understand what they want or what they need. I was an undergrad in statistics and got my MBA. So I'm very like research focused when it comes to love as well. And a lot of times what happens when there is no second date, guys do not reach back out. Oftentimes they don't know either. They don't have a specific reasons. I think sometimes women are like trying to focus and trying to figure out what was it? What did I do? What didn't I do? Right? Oftentimes it's like they don't even know. They, life got busy or they just didn't feel it for some way, but they can't necessarily explain it. Right. And so I think that the disconnect for men is really being able to get in touch with their feelings and to be able to communicate that in a way that women can also show up for them. right? So that's where I think the disconnect is.
That is so important. And that's just rewiring your mind to be on the right side of your brain and your intuition and not ignoring that. And I love how you mentioned how women should lead. So, what is your thoughts on an alpha female?
I love them. Half of the women that I work with, are alpha females. And I want your listeners to understand that you get to choose, right? You can choose to be in your dominant masculine energy and you can choose to be in your dominant feminine energy. It just means that your dating strategy has to change, right? It is 2021, right? One of the things that I think is important for us to realize, especially as people of color, is that our mothers and our grandmothers did not have as much agency and choice that you do now. So continuing the pathology of how they connected with their partners actually doesn't make sense, right? And so realizing that you get to be the alpha female if you want to, but it just means that you need to be looking for someone that's a little bit more in his dominant feminine energy, right? More artistic, sometimes more engineer types, right? The laid back guys that don't feel like they need to lead. That's who you should be going for if you're an alpha female or in your dominant masculine energy. And the flip is right if you want to be in your dominant feminine energy. Same for, women that are in their feminine energy and men that are in their feminine energy, right? What happens when we have an alpha and an alpha is two things. One, you either emasculate them, right, by paying for dinner or doing things that he wants to do, and you're not creating space for him to feel of value to you in the relationship. So he's gonna either demote himself to a child and you become the mother. That's one. The second thing is that he's either going to be super competitive with you, which means that there's going to be a lot of arguments and a lot of knocking of the head to try to get that power in the relationship, right? So that's what I've seen traditionally when we have two very dominant masculine energy individuals in a relationship, or at least trying to be.
With dealing with a relationship, I would love to know the perks of being a girlfriend. I feel like someone just made up that term and now women are just settling for that. How you mentioned the relationship is a give and take. What is the dynamic of a proper relationship?
Yeah, that's a good question. So before I get to that question, though, I want to be super clear that dating is not what I call mission based. Dating is not for you to get a boyfriend, get a man, get a husband, or any of that. Because literally tomorrow you could lower all of your standards and get a boyfriend, right? Or get a husband. That's not what it's about. This is about you becoming your full self, you becoming the woman that you are meant to be, right? The work that I do with the clients that I work with is about making sure that they become the best partner that they can be, right? Because you can be in any sort of relationship. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a successful one. I am really in the business of creating long lasting, healthy relationships and marriages. And so it's really about you being able to work on your vulnerability, understand who you are and what you want, right? Working on your boundaries and how to set them, right? It's about healing some of those parts of yourself that maybe haven't been healed in the past, whether it's like childhood trauma. It's about understanding your patterns and why you have those patterns in terms of your romantic relationships, right? It's about your confidence. It's about how you communicate. It's about all of those different things. It's about your mindset as well. So those are the things that we're really working on here. And that's what I want to encourage your listeners to also be thinking about, that like, no, it's not about the man, girl. There's millions of men. You can get a man. That's not what this is about. This is not about you getting a boyfriend. And also, this is not about you being a girlfriend, right? The premise of your question is that a girlfriend is the goal, right? And what I'm saying is that it should not be the goal, because one of the mindsets that I think a lot of women have, especially women of color, Black women, is that they want to be chosen, right? Instead of doing the choosing, which is a completely different power dynamic, right? That if I'm chosen, then I'm worth something. But girl, you were already worth something before you were quote unquote chosen, right? So it's not about being the girlfriend. So I just wanted to say that before I get to your general question about a healthy relationship. So in terms of what I talk to my clients about when they get to that point where they're going to be exclusive, is I don't really care about labels, and I don't really think that anyone else should really care about labels. But what is important when you get exclusive is the conversation that comes along with it, right? It is the what are the expectations of my relationship with you now? How do we communicate? How do we date? How do we disagree? Right? What sort of things do we do together? How much time are we spending together? Right? All of those different things are should be in your conversation when it comes to exclusivity. And if it's not, then you need to have it. And here's the thing, a lot of guys will not have the answer to that because they're not thinking about it. And oftentimes, a lot of women won't either. I have a whole exercise in my program about this because most of my clients don't know what they want when it comes to an exclusive relationship. They're just happy to be in one. But that's not going to help you actually have a long lasting, healthy relationship. You have to be very clear in what you want and why you want it, why it's important to you, right? And so, first, figuring that out, right? And that's different for every woman, right? And it's important to realize that your experiences are obviously going to shape who you are. And so for some clients, I have unconditional love and nurturing is something that's really important. Whereas for other clients, it's more about dependability and reliability. It's based on, you know, little secret here, but whatever was not necessarily being met in terms of your relationship with your parents is probably what you need in your romantic relationship. So for me personally, right, my father abandoned me when I was really young. So someone that was dependable and reliable was like the world to me. But that's going to be different for every individual. So understanding what that is for you is going to help you in setting the expectations of the relationship. And one thing that I think is also really important is when you have that conversation, realize that it is a verbal contract, right? And men don't like to go against their word, right? So that's why it's also important to have this conversation so that you guys are both on the same page of what the relationship is looking like afterward. Because if you don't have that conversation, which we don't so many times, right? Because we're doing what our moms and our grandmothers did, which was the guy said he wanted to be with us, so I guess we're together, right? I don't know if it was like this for you, but like in junior high, if you walked together at the end of school, y'all were together. Like if y'all were hanging out, if you guys were holding hands, okay, you were officially together, but there was no necessary conversation associated with what that even looked like. And that just, it's interesting, but it translates over to our adult relationships as well for some reason. So I want to encourage your listeners to have that conversation and be very clear about what you want so that you can communicate it to the guy that you're talking to or whoever your future partner is going to be. Because if they don't know what you want and what you need, they can't actually fulfill it, right? And then there becomes a disconnect. So it's really about communicating that first and foremost. So those are, I think, are the important tenets and foundations of the relationship before you actually get into them.
I love how you mentioned just before even getting in a relationship, it's so important to have a relationship with yourself. So, dealing with that, how do you encourage women, especially Black women, to heal their hearts?
A couple of things, right? You have, I think it's important for us to realize that you being the strong Black woman actually doesn't serve you, right? It doesn't serve you, especially in your romantic relationships, because if you're strong, if you can do for yourself, then there is no space for a man to do things for you. And that is what pleases them. Pleasing you pleases them. So if you are doing this thing and you're doing it all on your own and you're Miss Independent and you got a lot of pride in that, you're not really creating space for romantic love, at least from a man, right? So realizing that part of that you're going to have to let go, right? I mean, it's your choice, right? If you want to stay doing that, then again, we want someone, a guy that's maybe more in his dominant feminine energy. But I think of like feminine energy in three different ways. I think about it in terms of like the women that are super like nagging and clingy and always texting and always calling and doing way too much. That's like the first level. And that's obviously not hot to guys because they don't want to be feel like they're your entire world. The second level right? I think I call the Miss Independence, which a lot of Black women actually are in because we've had to, right? We've seen our mothers do it, we've seen our grandmothers do it, whether we were brought up in single, parent households. So that just seems normal for us. That's the model. So, and it's probably what is taught to us too, that you can't rely on anybody, you have to do for yourself. So, and when that is the case, you, again, like I was saying before, you don't give space for people to be there for you, right? The third level of feminine energy is where you know you can do everything, but you're allowing and letting him do the things for you because ultimately it takes things off of your plate and it makes him feel good. And when he's feeling good, he's also making you feel good at the same in the same kind of vein. So I think it's important to think about that and how you're really engaging in kind of in a relationship or interaction with men and being able to rely on others, right? Accept, like feminine energy is all about accepting and rejecting, right? You get to say yes or you get to say no, right? And then it's up to the guy to figure out, okay, well, what's going to be best for her, right? And he's supposed to solve those things for her. When we're talking about how do we like connect on a deeper level, right? It's one, I think it's really kind of embodying that feminine energy for the most part, if that's something that you want to do. Most women do, right? 80-20 rule, 80% of women generally want to be in their feminine. That we want to truly embody that. The other thing that I think is really important when it comes to really kind of creating that connection is this ability to be vulnerable, right? Which is really hard to do because we saw our really strong Black moms not be vulnerable because they didn't have the space to, right? This is goes to my previous point about we're in a different generation that our mothers were, right? If we think about it back in the 80s and maybe 90s, I think it was in the 70s when women were actually able to have a bank account in their own name, right? So that gives you an indication of what sort of agency or lack thereof that women, let alone Black women, had when it came to their own autonomy, right? And so I think it's really important for us to really kind of lean into our vulnerability and be able to speak to the things that are personal to us, not just like these things happen to us, but um, also how do I feel about them? What do I think about them? So vulnerability, I think, is also really important. Going back to this strong Black woman, it's important to take off that cape, right? It's important to be able to feel your feels. It's important for you to, you know, be really happy if you're really happy or really sad if you're really sad. Oftentimes, what I find is I think about it quantitatively. For on a scale from 0 to 10, oftentimes we're either like around an 8 or around a 3 or a 4, but we communicate as if we're at a 5. So if someone says, "How are you doing?" the answer is generally, "I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm good," but it doesn't really give the person something to go off on, right? They can't support you if you're okay or if you're fine, right? So I want the women out there, especially Black women, to be able to take space in their emotional country and be able to say, I'm doing really good and this is why I'm doing really good, so that, in romantic relationships or in dating, men can support you, right? And if you are and motivate you to even go on to higher heights, right? Or if you're not feeling great, be able to say, I'm really struggling right now, and this is why, right? It gives him the opportunity to swoop in and be the hero or support you and hold space for you, which is so important in relationships. So just being able to be super vulnerable and step into that femininity, however you see fit, I think are really important points here.
Mm, that is powerful, especially letting go of the stigma of having to be a strong Black woman and allowing in your state of being, just receiving the blessings and receiving the favor on your life is so important for women to understand. And I love how you mentioned about vulnerability. So What have you observed between others that is hard for them to open up, to open their heart, to have their heart as light as a feather?
I think one, we're never taught that, right? We're never taught to talk, especially in Black households. As a child, you're supposed to be seen and not heard. So, and vulnerability is about communicating how you're feeling and what's going on with you, right? So we have this like already this training for most of our lives that we can't do this, right? Or also just society from a societal level, right? There are also other groups out there that try to limit, especially Black women. And so we also feel this need that we have to put the armor on because vulnerability means weakness. And in relationships, it doesn't. It's actually a level of strength. Vulnerability is the way that you can actually connect with men. And a lot of women don't actually understand that you lead the emotional and vulnerability charge. I call it like creating a vulnerability pool, right? And what generally happens is that men will stick their toe in a little bit, see if it's safe, and then dive in the pool with you to be vulnerable together and have that safe space together because they can't do that in any other facet of their life. That's what makes the relationship super important and like something that can be that is like not like completely untouchable to the outside world, right? At work, he's doing him, he's in his masculine, he's thinking, he's doing, he's performing, he's asserting, right? When he comes home, he wants to lay out, he wants to exhale, he just wants to be at home, right? And that goes to the previous point about if he's with an alpha female, then they're like competing. It doesn't feel like home. It doesn't feel like he can exhale, right? He just wants to be emotionally safe with you. And if he can do that, and it starts with your vulnerability, then that relationship is going to be destined to some really great things.
As well as vulnerability and moving to transparency, how do you operate in that lane as well? Just being transparent to not tell too much. How do you balance the two between transparency and vulnerability?
That's a really good question. So, the way that I think about it, first, I always encourage my clients to always be their exact selves, right? And sometimes that's going to feel like a little bit too much, or it's going to feel like a little bit less, right? Our job is not to necessarily not be ourselves in this love game, right? Our job, which is actually harder than it sounds, is to be our 100% full self. And that people who are going to really like you are, even if you're telling all of your business, right, is that's the match, right? You can't limit yourself and you can't play 80% in this love game. And that's what we do, right? That's what we do. We're trying to hold some things back. If that's not your natural personality and you're extroverted and you like to tell all this tea and it just talk about so many different things, that's you, right? I'm not here to say don't be you because the last thing that I want to happen is that you're being Miss Prim and Proper and just trying to be the girlfriend, and you're doing this thing for 2 or 3 months, and then you become the girlfriend, and then after a month of doing that, what naturally happens when you're in a relationship, what I call the comfortable stage, is you let all of that go and you're just yourself, and that's ultimately going to be confusing to your partner because he's not going to know who you are.
I noticed that it's a lot of actors in the love game. I mean, they put on this stage, they put on this mask, and then when they get comfortable, they let it all hang out.
It's naturally going to happen for anyone, right? We're just going to naturally just sit into ourselves. But the part that I work on with my clients is starting with that from the jump, right? Being able so that there are no like hidden magic tricks afterward. It's like, no, this is me. This is who I am. I'm quirky. I talk a lot, right? I have a lot of opinions. That's me. I think in terms of your question about transparency, though, I think it's important to think about what whatever I'm telling this person, does it give them a better sense of who I truly am? I think that's the question that you have to ask yourself, right? That um, because ultimately you want them to know who you are so that they can make an informed decision about whether they want to continue to chat with you or not. Here's the thing. in this love game, 9 out of the 10 guys that you are going to be dating are not going to be the one, right? And it's important to know the statistics, just like if you were gambling or whatever, to know that most of the time they're not going to be the one. But I want you to be super prepared so that when the one comes, that you're playing full out as yourself and not anyone else. So those 9 individuals are going to be really great practice for you to share who you are and all of yourself.
You said 9 out of 10, they are not going to be the one.
Yeah.
And realizing that. So, what have you observed between just the desperation just to try to have this person be the one when they're not the one?
A natural human desire is control, right? And we want to control our environments, we want to control other people. And I think that's where it comes from mostly. But one of the important things to realize is that if you want to be in a successful relationship, you have to learn acceptance of yourself, acceptance of other people. When you try to change someone, it means that you're not accepting them. And if you're not accepting them, it ultimately means that you're not accepting yourself. So you need to go in and figure out what parts of yourself are you not fully accepting and why, right? And get clear with that. And you can do that with a therapist, you can do that with a coach. And then once you're able to do that, I think you're going to have a different perspective on accepting people for how they show up instead of justifying to yourself that, oh, maybe they can actually do this or that, right? No, right? One of the things I think is important is if something happens in a relationship or in a courtship that is not pleasing to you, your job is to state that it's not pleasing to you and what you would prefer, right? Or what you're not comfortable with and what you are comfortable with. This is about the boundary work that I was talking about and asserting your voice, which is so important. If after that they continue to do what they want to do, then we accept them for that and realize that they're focused on themselves and not you. And for the women that are listening, I want you to know that your you are the priority. Your feelings are the priority. And if he is not respecting those, then he is not for you. If he is focused on himself and what he wants to do and what his goals are, then the relationship is not going to work.
Beautiful. I realized that once you have unconditional love for yourself, now you can meet others with unconditional love. But realizing that most of this relationship and the way our minds are wired is to love conditional. So, can you dive more deeper into unconditional love and conditional love?
It's interesting because, and I think this is more so for like Black families, but there's a lot of conditional love in Black families that if you don't act right, something's going to happen to you, which is going to feel like you don't love me as a child. Because as children, we make everything about ourselves. It's just how we do it. So, oftentimes we are disciplined in a way that if we make mistakes, uh, then it feels like people don't love us anymore, right? And we can there's so many different examples of that. I'm sure that you can even think about your own examples where you felt like, oh, I did this one thing and then it felt like the door shut on me for some reason, right? And so we get used to and trained to feel like this is what love is and what it should be like. When in reality, that's not how it should be, right? That like we have to um, we have to approach things that we don't like in a way of just accepting them first and foremost and realizing, okay, this is where he or she is at. This is what they did. This is their reality. This is how they're experiencing things. And realize that you get to make a choice about whether you are continuing to love that person or not. If it harms you in a certain kind of way, you have definitely the right to create distance away from that situation. But understanding where that line is, I think, is the tricky thing, especially for women, that they don't know where that line is. And so some things that are out of bounds get justified and stay in bounds. Some things that are totally in bounds become out of bounds for them because of past traumas that they haven't necessarily felt or healed from. So, in terms of unconditional versus conditional, realize that the history of that for you is probably conditional. So, part of the work that needs to be done is realizing that the person that you're with, um, ultimately, there's a level of trust there that is deeper than probably a lot of your other relationships. And to know that person and realize that if they're doing this intentionally or not, and you will know that person to realize if they are respecting your wishes, what you want, what you don't want. And if there is a pattern of them continuing to disrespect those boundaries that you set in the relationship, then that person is probably not for you, right? Because he or whatever, whoever, is not unconditionally accepting where you want to be in the relationship. But it starts with you, right? That's what I want to harp on this point because it's so important that if you're not setting the boundaries here, then we it's hard to establish what's conditional and what's not, because there are no statutes in place to actually establish that.
Going deeper into establishing boundaries, I feel as though the first step is to know yourself, to be able to even go deeper into what you don't want and what you do want in relationships. So, how do you teach women to go deeper into themselves to know what they actually desire within themselves?
I work with my clients for 6 months. And so every time we talk, whether it's in my sessions or I give them my personal number, because I generally want them to message me right after every date that they have. So I want to understand what's going on with them. I'm constantly asking them that, right? And when you do, when that happens, my clients automatically start anticipating that question and start asking it for themselves, right? So have an accountability partner to continue to ask you about how you're feeling about things. One, I think that's really important. Two, women have amazing intuition and you feel things in your body. And I wish I had that, but I don't. So you have to trust what your body is telling you, because your body will give you the secrets of the universe, as they say, that will give you a certain feeling, and through that you'll be able to be guided in a way that will be trusting. What's unfortunate is that a lot of women don't trust their bodies and they ignore them, right? For example, black girls out there, when you're getting your hair done and something hurts, but your mama says, no, it doesn't hurt, right? And she gaslights you and she forces you to ignore the pain that's in your body, right? That's an example, right? When you are menstruating and you are in pain and you're pretending like everything is hunky-dory, you're ignoring your body, right? Instead of actually acknowledging the pain that's happening in your body. So I want you, and these are the things that we talk about in my program, right? We have to be super in tune with what's going on here and not ignore it so that we can be guided in a way that's going to be best for us, because we have all the answers within us.
It's magical once you realize that, because we have been programmed and wired to just be trained on our left side of our brain to not tap into our feelings and our intuition, our creative side. So once you get into that, oh, you know what's up. I love how you mentioned just about the trauma and just healing. So how does your childhood affect your adulthood?
In every single way. What I know is that a lot of women enter into their adult romantic relationships as a little girl that they were, right? Whether it was looking for somebody that is doing the things that they never had, right? If you had an overly critical mother, right? I could tell you right now that your love language is probably words of affirmation, right? And that you're going to need to hear it.
Mm.
If you had somebody that was, you know, super narcissistic or alcoholic, that were like really focused on themselves, then you're probably going to need acts of service, right? Someone that's going to do things for you and make you the focus, right? And so understanding what you didn't have is going to help you understand what you want, and not just what you want, but what you need in these relationships moving forward. In terms of the healing portion, first we have to acknowledge it, right? So many people, so many of my clients too, either completely black out because things have been so hurtful, or they never think about it. They're just on their everyday life and just getting through each day, right? But you can do that and you can talk to a million different people, but it's probably not going to be successful because there are going to be things that come up that you get triggered about and you're going to have no reason or understanding why that is. So that when that happens, your partner's just going to be like, wow, she's crazy. Instead of you saying, like, actually, that reminds me of this thing that happened in my life, right? And that's why I'm sensitive about this, right? And when you're able to communicate that with your partner, then your partner can show up for you and know that and be able to not actually do those things again, right? But you have to acknowledge it and you have to know why it's hurt you so much and how that affects how you relate to other people. And it's not just romantic relationships, right? I'm a dating and relationship coach. So this also spans your relationship with your parents, your family, your work relationships as well. Like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you are someone who is getting triggered often and going from 0 to 10 and getting really upset, you're probably not just doing that in romantic relationships, but in all of your relationships. And it's happening from your childhood. So the importance of acknowledging and making those connections in terms of, oh, this is why I do it. When you acknowledge it, you actually kind of minimize its power, right? Because you're like, oh, okay, that's why I'm doing this. But then you can actually figure out what exactly you should be doing and how you should be thinking about it. And that's something that I work with my clients on in terms of mindset and the tools to be able to reframe things in a way that's going to best serve them.
That mindset is the key to it all right there. What does a whole individual look like? Being whole.
A good question. I don't think anyone is ever whole, right? I think we're all always working to get there. That's why I think life is so interesting. So I don't have an answer for you, to be honest with you. I do think that we're all on this journey together, right? And we're all looking to become whole. There are always going to be opportunities or moments for us to work on ourselves, and to think that we're whole all of a sudden and on one day, I think is premature and not realistic. So I don't want us to be thinking about it in that way. I want us to, because if we do, we get complacent, right? And things start to come up because we think that we have everything solved. And I don't think that anyone has ever been successful when they have rested on their laurels. That there's always work to be done. There's always things that can be improved upon, whether it's communication, whether it's just getting super in touch with the things that have happened to you, vulnerability, boundaries, all of that.
Striving for wholeness. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I think that understanding where your areas of opportunities, as I like to call them, where they are, everyone has different, things that they need to focus on. One of the things that I do at the first session with my clients is kind of actually ask them about those different areas so I know the things that we're going to need to work on for a little bit longer or shorter, right? I have some clients that are focused on, okay, I need to work on my confidence. I don't have confidence to actually accomplish a lot of different things in my life, and that's affecting my romantic life. Or I have some people that have some deep trauma that we have to talk through and work through. I'm a coach, so I'm focused on the present and the future, but therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists are focused on the past. So we delve into the past a little bit, but it's only in relation to connecting it to the present and the future, right? So in terms of wholeness, it's really about understanding where those opportunities are for you. And what that looks like is asking people who know you the best what you need to work on, what they think you what would serve you best, right? What are the things that they would like to see in you, right? And I think it's a combination of what they say and what you say, and looking at both of those different kind of uh, topics to do all of the work. Because how we see ourselves is very different than how others see us. And so having that perspective, I think, can only help you.
The art of staying present. How do you do it?
Difficult, right? I think most people are either, they say if you're focused on the future, you have a lot of anxiety. If you're focused on the past, then you probably have a lot of depression in your life. And so think about your life. Think about if those things are definitely a part of your life, to understand exactly if you're future facing or past facing. In terms of being present, I think it's really about gratitude. I think it's about focusing on the things that you have now, the life that you have now, the weather, the relationships that you have now that are successful, that are great, that bring you joy, right? I always talk about the things that bring me joy right now, and grounding myself in that. And I also think it's important to focus on consistently telling yourself that you love yourself, right? Because we can always think about the things that we want to be or do in the future, or the things that we've done or who we were in the past. But being able to be present just with yourself and speaking to yourself in the present tense, I think is actually, sounds very simplistic, but is very powerful. So I'm always either writing in my journal, I absolutely love myself, or I'm looking in the mirror and looking right into my eyes and saying that I love myself. And I think it's like really helpful.
That's a revolutionary act when you start loving yourself, because now you're not going to look outside of yourself for anything.
Yeah, definitely.
This is so powerful. This was so amazing. I just want to close off with, how should we and how do we go about doing the inner work into building our confidence?
It's a good question. So it's going to be different for every kind of aspect of your life. I can speak to it from the dating and relationship sphere, which is, especially for the women out there, I think it's important to realize that you are the CEO of your own life, right? And I think sometimes women act as if they're the interns trying to prove themselves to get the job, and realizing that these men are the interns and it's their job to show up on time, to do the work, sometimes to do a little bit extra to prove that they're hardworking, right? So it's really about a reframing and a mindset shift about who you are and how much control, power, and agency you have in every aspect of your life. So that reframe of CEO of your love life, I think, is a really powerful one, especially for the women that I work with that are very professionally minded and ambitious.
That's incredible. Everybody else is the intern. It's just knowing that and remembering that. I don't know why we forget.
Yeah,
I
I
don't.
don't either. I'm always reminding people, what do you want to do? Okay, we're going to do it then.
That's it. It's so powerful when you take your power back.